Hello, how are you all? Today we are doing Beasts of a Little Land by Juhea Kim. Now this is noted on many lists as one of the most anticipated books of 2021-2022. It's a debut novel and it purports to be a sweeping epic of Korean history in the 20th century with a colourful cast of characters that take us from the Japanese invasion and occupation at the beginning of the 20th century, 1917, through to the fight for independence and through to post-independence partition and separation and the rise of dictatorship in the South. Huge sweeping epic, colourful cast of characters, what's not to love, and the opportunity to hear a new history that isn't always present in Western literature, new ideas, new backdrop, new themes, exciting. Okay, so there has been a lot of interest in this book. Like I said, it is the most anticipated book, and for a debut it is very impressive. Juhea Kim has really brought to life a country in turmoil and change with hopes and dashed dreams, and that sweeping epic of history is beautifully realised. There are gaps, as I'll come to later, but that sweep from tiny village to city, changing landscapes, changing political dramas. Yes, very interesting, very well done. The challenge I have with every epic is don't let that become so necessary that it swamps characterization, and that is where I feel Beasts of a Little Land struggles. Ostensibly we follow a love triangle from three young kids, a young courtesan named Jade, a street urchin JungHo, and another young man who's going from a rickshaw whose star is on the rise. They are our plot, our characters that lead us through from Pyongyang, Seoul, in the 1920s through the fight for communism, independence, partition, and etc., and how their different trajectories, their different struggles reveal Korea. They are quite thinly drawn. Let's take, for example, Jade, the courtesan, who is our central character. She is perennially good. She remains holier than thou throughout the whole book. She is a very lovely, honest, good-hearted, well-intentioned girl, young woman who never seems to do the wrong thing, who puts trust in everyone, who supports everyone, is faithful and loyal and kind. That never changes throughout the scope of the book, and that is quite a hard character to live with. One of the good ways of comparison is Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. A problematic epic, I appreciate, but if you can just stick with me for the sake of this comparison. Scarlett O'Hara remains one of the best lead characters you can get in a book because she is horrible, she's nasty, she can be a bitch, she is cruel, but she's also a survivor, and so she has complexity, she has conflict, which makes her an engaging central character, and that is what is missing with Jade. She remains purer than pure, despite the fact that she's given a courtesan background throughout the whole book. What is interesting is the colourful cast of supporting characters. So they are far more nuanced, from a Japanese military commander to Jade's friends in the courtesan school, from street thugs, from communist idealists, from independents, middle-class politicians, intelligentsia. These are more interesting characters, and they certainly give a lot more nuance and depth to the story. They too, though, can come a bit pantomime-y. The Japanese villain remains villainous throughout the epic, which I can understand. You know, Japan and the Japanese committed grave crimes in Korea, and there is a sense of wanting justice for that. But as a character, they can read quite hard if they remain villainous throughout the book. So how do I phrase this book to you? Do I want to sort of pin it down and say no, or do I want to encourage it? Epics are hard to write. but they are enjoyable. And look, for me, I enjoyed this book. 3 or 4 stars, 3 stars maybe, because the characterization still needs a lot of work. That doesn't mean this book shouldn't be read or I don't rate it. What I'm saying is, as an epic, it's not going to be up there with, the Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell epic, or Gone with the Wind, or the recent Hanya Yanagihara's To Paradise. These are epics. This is a debut, and it's very well written. But when you take on an epic, it demands every aspect of literary skill, from characterization to plot to themes, etc. There are some great points. A nice theme in this is Juhea, obviously because of her background and she knows so much about Korean culture and Korean history. She does use some interesting Korean themes. I'm just looking up the word. The word is inyon. It's the concept of a thread, of a human thread that links lives, that we lives from our past, characters from our parents' past, all play out into our present and into our future, that there's a thread that connects us, all the people in your lives and the people who come in and out of it with purpose. And that thread is, of course, beautifully realised in this epic, where characters who die right at the beginning play out, and that thread carries on throughout the whole book, about seeming coincidences, seeming random incidents that play out into the future, with resonance and with impact. And that's beautifully done. Like I say, the supporting cast of characters, beautifully done. I would have loved more nuance and conflict in the central characters. Jade is too pure for me to get too excited about. So how about Korea? I have to admit, I do know quite a bit about Korea, as I studied it a lot, etc. However, this is beautifully done. There is the capture of that Japanese invasion, of the idealistic rise of communism, the abandonment of Korea from the West and from its Western allies, from the idea of democracy. That is beautifully done. What is incredible is this book spans from about 1915, 1916 to Park's beginning of the dictatorship in the 1960s in South Korea. Remarkably, there is not a paragraph, a line set in the Korean War of 1950 to 1953, the most seismic event in Korean 20th century history, the dreadful partition of the country and its sort of takeover by the huge superpowers of the time, Russia and America, the brutality of partition, the way it cleaved families and societies, and not a mention of it. We sort of leap from 1945, the defeat of Japan, to the 1960s with no mention of the Korean War, which is two things I do. One is, how can you miss the Korean War if you're writing an epic about Korea? And two, it's sort of as if the characters' lives when they hit 40 weren't as interesting as when they were in their teens, 20s and 30s, which is quite telling, not in a good way. That suddenly, let's kind of wrap them up when they're in their 70s, but I'm not going to invest anything in their 50s, which is a shame. I don't know if Juhea was being edited. It is, you can see epics that are nice, kind of chunky. So yeah, for me, there are gaps. However, like I said, this is enjoyable. It's a lovely read. There is a wonderful sweep through history, through characters. I just wanted a bit more. Beast of a Little Land by Juhea Kim.